So when we look at drug interactions, there's some specific types that we have to look at. The additive, or what I believe your textbook refers to as a potentiation effect. It's basically the same of taking the two effects of the drugs and the two effects being equal to basically both of the drugs being added together. So you can see it's, another way of looking at this is 1 + 1 = 2. So it's basically you're getting stronger effects from the drug. So if we look at the effects, if you took Motrin, you took Naproxen, which is the which is basically your Aleve, if you will, and codeine, you basically get the effects of all of those drugs put together. What's important here is to educate athletes about active ingredients, and particularly in combination drugs. So a combination drug would be, for instance, like Tylenol cold would be an example of a combination drug where you have the acetaminophen, which is the Tylenol, coupled with the cough suppressants and the decongestants that would be in those drugs. It's important to make them aware of that so that they know not to take, for instance, say somebody is taking, and maybe a better example would be this, say somebody is taking an Advil cold and sinus. They shouldn't take additional doses of Advil if they have another injury, an orthopedic injury that they're taking Advil for. They shouldn't take more Advil on top of that. So it's important to make sure that you educate them on that. The antagonistic effect is when the effectiveness of a drug gets reduced. So that would be represented by the 1 + 1, the effects being less than 1 + 1. And something you could look at with that is aspirin and insulin. What's going to happen is in these situations, a lot of times the drugs kind of compete for the receptors, and this could also happen with foods as well. A lot of your antibiotics should not be taken with dairy products, or even taken in close proximity with the consumption of dairy products. So that's, again, it's an important thing to look at. Again, it's not so important that you recognize it, and I'm not going to make you responsible for knowing every single drug that's antagonistic with another food or another drug, because even in a lot of instances, pharmacists even need to look some of that stuff up. But just be aware of the fact that can happen. And when we talk about antibiotics, we'll mention that further. But just be aware of that particular type of effect. Now, the synergistic effect. Now, it can be easy to possibly confuse the additive effect and the synergistic effect. The synergistic effect is when you get effects greater than just the individual drugs being added together. So, for instance, an NSAID, like ibuprofen, being combined with an opioid analgesic for more pain relief. That's when you get greater than 1 + 1. Okay, so it'd be like saying 1 + 1 = 3, which obviously we all know isn't the case, but that's when you get. So the difference between the synergistic and the additive effect. The additive effect is literally when you're taking the effects of one drug, the effects of another drug, or even if you're looking at 3 drugs like the example I gave, and the effects being equivalent to just those being added together. With the synergistic effect, you actually get greater effects than just the individual effects being added together. So make sure you can differentiate between those two, because that could get a little confusing and can mix you up a little bit. A lot of times physicians will utilize synergistic effect of drugs. Obviously, when you look at an opioid analgesic like codeine, they're not going to just prescribe more codeine because of the potential adverse effects. So what they'll do is, to make the pain effects greater, they will give something, they will combine it with like an ibuprofen or even acetaminophen to produce more pain relieving effects. The placebo effect is an effect not attributed to the drug. Now, the one thing people tend to think is placebo is imaginary. So it's, you hear a lot of times in studies, for instance, they'll give people a sugar pill to see if a drug will really work, or is it just the fact that the person thinks they're taking something that it's having beneficial effects. So the placebo effect is not imaginary, but all placebo means is that what you're looking at, the beneficial effects cannot be directly attributed to a drug. And again, when you look at a lot of studies and articles, anytime they study a drug, they want to look to see, well, is the person getting better because of the actual chemical in the drug, or are they getting better just because they're thinking they're taking something, and is there some other benefit to them thinking that they're actually taking a drug? So that would be the placebo effect. So these are your learning outcomes. So when I give learning outcomes pretty much at the end of every presentation I give. That's basically all your learning outcomes are a summary of what you need to know. So, and pretty much, if we do any type of review for our exams, students will always ask, well, do I need to know this? Well, is it in your learning outcomes, yes or no? So it's always important that you know, and the learning outcomes basically summarize everything we went over. So yes, you're responsible for knowing everything. Obviously, a test you can only ask so many questions on a test. So yes, there might be something left off, but as an allied health professional, it's important that your knowledge base be kind of set with certain things. So always review learning outcomes and make sure that you're aware of all of them. And if any questions come up, don't hesitate to ask. And these are the rest of the individual learning outcomes. So that concludes the video, all of the various parts of the pharmacodynamics and pharmacokinetics. If there are any questions, again, you could email me. That would be the simplest way, and if I need to, I could always contact you via phone as well.